Thank you. I will start see if it works without the mic, but then otherwise I will pick up the mic. You think I should pick up the mic? No, it's fine. I'll try to speak up. Well, I'm very delighted to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really inspiring to be here and see that you have this process of thinking what should be the next step. So you had the first period, and now you look into the next period of what should the governance structure be like. And I had the pleasure of having meetings yesterday and today with the ministry and others as well, and also listening to you, Minister. I think it was very inspiring, and I can feel the commitment that you actually would like to strengthen the governance and the role of the council, and having a discussion on what should be next step. And I think this is a great opportunity. So I would like to share some lessons learned from Denmark. As Torun said, I've been there for 5 years nearly. So that was just when we had the first Climate Act, and just before we were having an election and things were changing. And then we have the second Climate Act, which I'm going to talk in more detail about today. And I should say that we have been very much inspired by the case of UK and what the Committee on Climate Change has been doing in the UK. So you will probably recognize from what I'm saying many of the same things that is what is happening in UK. So I think that today in Denmark we have a nice structure, and it actually works quite well. And it's not just to say that the council is doing well, but the whole idea of having a debate between the council and government, ministries, and the wider audience works very well. So I think we have a good debate. But as you will see, there's a nice structure around it, and there's certain things about the setup of the council. And I will finally be talking a lot about the Stakeholder Forum, the importance of involving stakeholders. Yes. So the first thing is to dig into the Climate Act as it looks right now, and then afterwards I will come back to the council and say more about that. Yes, so just a little background for your knowledge. So the first Climate Act in 2014, that was voted for by actually a quite small majority. And then in 2018, people were getting more and more interested in the climate change issue. It became clear that it's more and more urgent. And the election in 2019 was actually very much about climate change and what to do about it. So in the campaign, it was also about numbers. So actually the binding target that we have today of 70% in 2030 compared to 1990 was part of the election debate and campaign. So they promised this 70% binding target. And that showed to be quite important. And just after the election, at the council we launched this report, which actually gave some inputs to how to have a governance structure around the climate policy, but not, of course, as much about the council, because that would be to give advice on which role we should play. But the overall structure gave some input to that. And then finally, there was a political agreement in December 2019 with a very broad and big majority where they defined what should go into the Climate Act, which was voted for in June 2020. And this is very important, that it was a very broad majority, which gave a lot of stability. These are the key elements of the Climate Act law, but actually they are more or less the changes, the strengthening from the first Climate Act law into the second. So, first of all, the binding targets in 2030 and 2050 were simply written into law. We also have targets for 2025, but not at that time. And we're referring to the Paris Agreement in terms of the level of ambition. Then there is an ongoing assessment of whether government is seen to actually deliver and reach the targets. Sorry. Whether they're actually delivering on the targets. So there's a monitoring process, and in Parliament there could be a process of actually duty to act. So if Parliament thinks that the government is not delivering, the government has to come up with suggestions for more action. And finally, what's called the guiding principles. That was all the many important interests from the politicians saying, when we do climate policy, we have to look into employment, we have to look into social balances, etc. So they are listed in the law in the first paragraph. And that is probably part of the reason why we had this broad agreement on the Climate Act, because there are many interests that we should be careful about, also in the Council. We should look into them when we come up with recommendations. And then if we look at the Council, the level of independence was increased. I'll come back to that. The number of Council members was expanded, and the competences that they should cover was expanded. I'll come back to that. And then some clear products were defined, something that the Council must look into. And one of them is assessing, as I said, whether government is on track to meet the targets. The other one is actually giving input to the climate targets, which is similar to the case of UK. So these are all new elements of the second Climate Act law. And finally, there was an increased or more systematic involvement of stakeholders, and we actually have a stakeholder forum. So it's outside the Council, but they have a clear role, and we have ongoing dialogue with the stakeholder forum. I will come back to that. So those are the most important new elements. So overall, there are like two legs in the Climate Act. On the left side, there is a national climate policy, and on the right one, the global focus that we in Denmark, as you in Iceland, can actually do some effort that could reduce emissions outside your country, could be lowering your carbon footprint or various things. But I will be focusing on the left side of this figure, on the national thing primarily. So it's this basic architecture and the consistency between targets, climate actions, and monitoring. So these are the key elements and how they should fit together. And we try to put a structure around that with 5-year cycles and 1-year cycles. And I'll zoom in on that. But basically the targets are for every 5 years, and the climate action plan and the monitoring process goes every year, so that's an annual process. But this is the overall architecture. So every 5 years, the government, or the Parliament, should decide on new climate targets that are 10 years ahead. So right now we are approaching 2025. So the next targets to be set would be for 2035. And at the Council we are working on scenarios for 2050 and 2035 to give input to this process. Also looking at the scenarios from EU and where is EU going to head. So that's basically that. But on top of that, the government recently took an initiative to say we actually want to be carbon neutral, not in 2050, but in 2045. So from time to time, something else can happen. So that actually increased the level of ambition. But it has not come into law. That will probably come into law in 2025. But that's the latest policy by the government. So this is a 5-year cycle. As you can see, we don't have carbon budgets like in the UK. We have targets every 5 years. So this is the annual cycle. And this is products that are mandatory to the council and to the government. Supplementary to this, the council is publishing more reports, like 2 or 3 reports every year. But this is what we have to do, and this is what is this main structure. So the calendar year starts as you can see, in February, where the council launches a new status outlook. This is the biggest report we make, and that consists of this assessment, whether we are on our way to reach the targets, and the policy recommendations. Then in April, the government come forward with a forecast and outlook. Where do we expect to be in 2030 or 35 with the policies that have already been decided upon? And we have, at the council, we have to comment on this outlook. What do we think about that? And so we ask for transparency and understand why the forecast looks the way it does. Then in September, the government comes with their climate action plan, which we are to comment on. So if there's something that we think needs further discussions or to be described in more detail, or something that might be sound strange, or then we make a small paper on that. So that goes into the political process as well. And finally, at the end of the year, we have the discussion on the state budget, and also this duty to act, where in principle the parliament can say, as I mentioned, that the government has to do more. And then all over again, we start next year. Could be that the council says, well, we think it has not been proven that we are on track, and then new policies, new recommendations come. So this is the structure of the mandatory products. So now let me turn to the council. So we have these 9 members. So it's based on scientific expertise. You have the chairman, second to the right, Peter Molgaard. Some of you met him in Dubai. And they are not all from universities, academia. So 2 of them are from institutions similar to universities, but not universities. And I'll just give you one example. The nice lady in the middle, she's called Britta, from Norway. So she works at the Statistics Norway. So she's got a lot of knowledge and comes with an outside perspective. But she's not from universities. But she's independent as she works at the Statistics Norway. And we have 2 co-chairs. They're appointed for 4 years, and then that could be prolonged for another 4 years. And it's actually up to the council itself to decide the next members, but which are formally approved by the minister. So in the law, it's actually specified which topics should be covered by the council members. And that's quite a few, these topics. And for each of these, there are actually one of the persons you saw before that are you might say, the expert on, for instance, agriculture, but some of them are covering more topics. So the importance is that the council as a whole are covering these nicely. And when they, for instance, last year, there was a change with another 3 members coming in. So they were looking at this and say, how can we cover that as good as possible? So as you can see, it's not just climate research, but it's all these different sectors and topics where you need to come up with policy recommendations. So, yes. So the council has basically 3 roles, being a watchdog, and an advisor to the government, and contributing to the public debate. And the watchdog is primarily from this assessment of the product from the government on whether we're on track to reach the targets, probably reduce the risk of inadequate action if that would be of risk. And then the role of being an advisor is probably the most important thing, because here the council becomes very concrete and on which policies and measures are the most obvious when you have to look at all these guiding principles: lowest cost, social balances, leakage, and other things. So we come up with recommendations. Giving the composition of the council members from different fields, different disciplines, I think they're quite good at giving a holistic approach, not just looking at one sector and not caring about, well, this might have an impact on land use, which means that you cannot use the same land here, and you have to think about it that way. And they look at both the short-term issues and long-term issues. Of course, you can think there might be a dilemma between being at the same time being a watchdog and an advisor. And I think it's fair to say that it has been a learning process, but that where we are now, I think people are happy about the council being both a watchdog when it's needed for, and an advisor. And we do have close dialogue with the minister and the ministries as well to provide this and actually being an advisor, hopefully helpful to the government. So when we got this Climate Act in 2020, there was a strategic process in the council where it was identified that the most important values, most important things to be in order to be successful would be to have high credibility and also to be seen as relevant. And that means basically looking into the topics that are needed for in the political process, being able to launch a report in good time before the political process, covering the relevant consequences of the recommendations, etc., etc. And what is most important in order to be credible are the things here in blue boxes. So I already mentioned the scientific expertise, where that's evidence-based, and there is arm length and independence, and this transparency. So actually we on our website you can see who actually we are meeting with, and in the report you can see who have we been talking to, and we try to be as transparent as possible. The council members, you can see if they're in other committees or something like that, there's an open process. And the relevance is, I think, has very much to do with the involvement of stakeholders, as I already mentioned. And so if I go to the next one. So seen from the council, it's always when you draw a map, you're always in the middle, right? So Europe is the middle. If you look at China, it's China, and so I might even have made the letters bigger and the council. That's very embarrassing. But these are the key stakeholders that we are talking to. So we're talking to the government on a regular basis, and the ministries, the agencies, the parliament. We are not actively talking to the parliament, but presenting reports to the parliament. And after the status outlook, we are having a meeting with them, saying, "What do you think about what's important to you?" And then this climate dialogue forum that I'll be showing in a minute. And the stakeholders in a broader sense. So that's the citizens, the companies, the local governments, etc., that have an interest in this. And then I should mention the secretariat. So we are supporting the council. So we are working full time, and the council members have their job at the universities. So for them, it's an extra job. So we are basically writing drafts for their discussions, and they decide where to go, what to change, the scope of the analysis, the approach, the type of recommendations. So we have a nice process between the council and the secretariat where we also buy in input from consultants, but primarily it's based within the secretariat. Yes. So I have, I think, 2 or 3 more slides. And this is just to zoom in on the stakeholder forum. So it consists of 40 members, and it's both from the business side, agriculture, industry, transport, etc. They are represented. It's also from the green NGOs and the youth. We have a youth climate council of youth. And labor unions, consumers, think tanks, and also the 5 ministries are actually represented here. And then we have meetings 2 or 3 times a year. One is in February, we have a status report, but then we have 1 or 2 other meetings where the stakeholders give input to us, which topics are actually the most important to us. Or difficult themes to grab, like what does it mean to be a front runner, for instance? It says in the Danish law we should be a front runner. What does it actually mean? How do we do that in a sensible way? Or what is very hot at the moment is the social balances. And I'm sure it's here too. So how do we look at social balance and social coherence? That has been discussed in this forum. But the point is that the stakeholders are outside the council. They are not interfering with what the report looks like as such. They see it after it's finalized, but having an opportunity to comment on it, and we put their comments on the website. And then we have bilateral meetings outside these meetings. Whoever is relevant stakeholders, we get in contact and they get in contact with us. So this is to sum up some of the selected lessons learned from the Danish case. So there are, I would say, 3 headlines. The first one being the importance of having a continuous progress. So we don't have a stop-go, but a continuously progressing. And that actually creates a stable and predictable environment. And so for instance, our businesses and enterprises, they are happy with this structure where they know what's going to happen in 5 and 10 years' time. It gives more certainty in terms of business cases and actually wanting to undertake green investments if you have this stability and predictability. Then there was the consistency between the target and action and monitoring. There was this about the cycles, the importance of mandatory cycles, and the clear roles of the council and ministries and agencies. The second one was the importance of ensuring that the council has, in fact, a high credibility, which is primarily driven by being independent and evidence-based with the scientific expertise. And then this of at the same being do as much as possible to be successful in being a watchdog and an advisor at the same time. We need to be a good advisor for the government, so the government actually gets some inputs that is useful for their further process. And finally, what I touch upon about stakeholders, that they feel that they are actually involved. They can come forward with their concerns, and they can actually be debated in an open manner. So those are my key lessons learned I would like to share with you. Finally, I would just make a small advertisement for our website. So, of course, we have all the full reports in Danish, and then we also have English summaries or policy briefs. And I just listed some of the most important reports, I think, on agriculture and electricity supply, etc., etc., climate-friendly food, peat soils, etc., etc. And you're also very welcome to reach out to the Secretariat and afterwards. Thank you.